All right, Susanna, floor is yours.
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Susanna Gregoire, and my project is um, highlighting the impact of globalization um, on Peruvian food and how Peruvian food has remained resilient and rooted in tradition. And you could go over to the next slide. Can you hear me?
Yeah, computer locked up. Go ahead.
All right. So Peruvian cuisine is worldwide. It's also recognized as being a fusion and very flavorful. And that's a result of the multicultural and the geographical diversity in Peru. So when we speak about geographical diversity in Peru, Peru consists of three geographic regions, which consist of the mountainous region. In the mountainous region, it's also called the highland region. You'll find ingredients such as quinoa, guinea pig, potatoes, which Peru has over 4,000 variety of, um, corn, which Peru has over 55 variety of, the coastal region, in which when you eat cuisines from the coastal region, it'll be heavily influenced by seafood, corn, lime, avocado, sweet potato, the Amazon region. And in the Amazon region, influence of you'll find influence of yucca, um, uh, tropical fruits, uh, uh, river fish such as trout, and exotic and flavorful ingredients. And also with the multicultural aspect of the diversity of Peru, Peru's diversity consists of African influence, which dates back to the 1500s, the Asian, specifically the Chinese and Japanese influence, which dates back to the late 1900s and early 20th century. Sorry, not late 1900s, but late 19th century, early 20th century, the Spaniards who colonized Peru, and their influence dates back to as far as the 1500s, and also the indigenous people of Peru. Um, One thing that I would like to highlight is that corn, which they call maíz, it's been discovered that um, corn has been dated back to over 6,500 years in Peru. And you will find that corn is heavily influenced in Peruvian dishes. And you could click on the next slide. So going back to the indigenous aspect of Peru, the historical and indigenous aspect of Peru. So when we speak about um, the indigenous people still have practices where they continue on with their cuisines and traditions the same way as what the Incans, the pre-Columbian times, used as well. The the Such as heating their food using heated stones, in addition to how they prepare their dishes and how they pass along the traditions verbally through generation after generation, how they um, purchase foods in a communal area and make food within the communal area. In reference to the Spanish influence of food, heavy meat, heavily influenced by meat, in addition to the Asian and which is African influence, which is heavily influenced by spice, stir fried, and soy. And you can um, continue on. So the impact of globalization in Peru. First and foremost, we have to speak about the fast food and imported goods. So many fast food chains, I've observed many fast food chains in Peru, such as McDonald's, which dates, it was introduced to Peru back in 1996. You have a lot of food chains, such as KFC, heavy on the Starbucks. I saw Longhorn, Burger King, in addition to the other threats, which consist of globalization, climate change, unpredictable weather, droughts, floodings in some regions, loss of traditions because there are the younger generation of Peruvians, they prefer to venture out to the city to find better opportunities and a way of life, as opposed to remaining in the rural areas, in Amazon areas. We stayed at a home of indigenous people and was advised that many of the indigenous people, they live on the land, basically. They live by their land, where the food that they farm, it's right there on their land. It's common to find several generations of people living in the same household, so it's easy to pass down traditions and whatnot. Other threats of globalization to Peruvian food systems is GMO, the introduction of GMO. Although it's illegal, you have multinational companies that are trying to introduce GMO seeds to Peru. And the Peruvian government has implemented a GMO cultivation law where it's illegal to bring in GMO seeds to Peru because it will wipe out the traditional seeds that's been there for thousands of years. However, due to farmers having low resources and unpredictable climate change, and they're heavily influenced by money to go and break the law and do that. You can go over to the next slide. Sorry. So the Peruvian, so as far as how Peru is persevering, basically, is through the help of government support. So UNESCO has labeled Peruvian cuisine as a cultural heritage. That's how they continue to promote their food and continue to strive beyond globalization. There are several chefs on social media that heavily promotes Peruvian food, Peruvian dishes, and teach Peruvians and those outside of Peru how to make Peruvian dishes. There's agricultural protection of Peruvian produce, such as the Parque de la Papa, that's in Cusco, and it's basically a reservoir where they preserve the different varieties of of potatoes, and that's located in Cusco. Also, festivals. Peru has one of the biggest festivals in in South America. That is the Ministral Cultural Festival that takes place in late September, and it promotes Peruvian dishes so that people could be introduced to Peruvian dishes, the different spices that's used in Peruvian dishes and whatnot. In addition, if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see it's the second picture. The second picture displays how Peruvians like to promote their culture through their food, where you can attend a dinner and a performance event where you're introduced to their culture based on the food. So you get a performance and you try the food as well. To the left of that, you'll see that's a picture of a shaman who's using some of the Peruvian ingredients to basically wish us luck. He was doing a what some would call a ritual to wish us luck. Another picture that I wanted to highlight is
Susanna,
at the Mhm.
Susanna, I got to
Can you hear
interject.
me?
I'm going to give you, you're running way over time. I got to give you 1 minute to finish your slides. You don't have time to go through
Okay,
these.
okay, gotcha. You could go over to the next slide. So the roles of family and community, as we indicated, recipes are passed through generations verbally. So Peruvians like to eat together as a family and shop at local markets as opposed to the big markets. In addition, they like to introduce foods from the Amazon region over to the coastal region and the mountainous regions. So you could go over to the next slide. And using globalization as an opportunity. So Peruvians have used globalization as an opportunity to promote their food and their cultural diversity through social media, through the food festivals, through the government as well, because the government is supporting that. And you could do the next slide. And so balance. In conclusion, the balance of the different cultures and the different cultural cuisines and the regional cuisines as well. So a strong identity. Peruvians are proud of their food. They're proud of their heritage, and they pronounce that through their food. More than nourishment. So with Peruvian food, it's more than nourishment to the body. It's a way of life. It's through their cultural practices, such as religions, what they wear, how they eat, how they survive, and how they market with one another in a cultural sense, where they frequent the local out air market as opposed to the big supermarkets. And next slide, and that should be it.
Okay, we got time for one question. Do we have one question?
What was the best thing you ate on the trip?
What was that?
What was the best thing that you ate on the trip?
It was a dish called Juan. So it was my favorite because it had plantains. So it had plantains. It was made with it was steamed in the plantain leaf, and it had chicken as well and rice. It was very flavorful because it had the traditional aspects to it as the Incan aspects. And also I resonated with it because it, being from the Caribbean, plantains is a staple, so is rice. So it was something that I was introduced to, and it was pretty delicious.
Okay, thank you.
yourself, what major, what year you want. Everybody, when you get there, introduce yourself because
Best
the
major.
rest of the people
Okay,
don't
best
know you. We know you, but.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jeffrey Bryan, and I'm a senior here. I'm an exercise science major. I have the honor of being under the Dr. Metter being my advisor.
Best major, you can say it.
Yeah, the best major in my opinion. So I enjoy it thoroughly. For my Peru Study Abroad trip, I chose to do agriculture. Just briefly, I chose to do the 3 areas we went in. We went to Lima first. We flew into Lima. Next, I did in Cañete, and then the last we went to Puno, and I did agriculture on Lake Titicaca. So, first of all, just brief, what is agriculture? You can go. Okay, sorry. Agriculture is the science or practice of cultivating the soil, producing crops, and raising livestock. What is the importance of agriculture? It supports livelihoods through foods, habitats, and jobs. It provides raw materials for food and other products, and it builds strong economies through trade. Just visual representation, excuse me. Got the fields up top here, producing foods and other products, which leads to money, which helps build strong economies. Okay, agriculture I expected. Top left here is terrace farming. This is more like Machu Picchu, which we did not go visit, but we did get to see on Lake Titicaca some of the terrace farming that they had. Poultry is a big industry in Peru. Expected to see some of that. Alpacas and llamas, we did see some of those. I got to experience that. And on the right here, just some crops, potatoes, tomatoes, and fishing down here on the bottom. Y'all see up there? See? There we go. All right, this is what I expected to see while we were on Lake Titicaca. All right, agriculture that we saw in Lima. This was not actually in Lima. It was a big city. I didn't see really any in Lima. This was right outside of Lima at the archaeological site of Pachacamac. Yeah. So interesting fact about this is everything, 99% of what we saw was dirt and temples and stuff like that. But this is the 1% area that we got to see, or they're actually able to grow crops. Top left, we have alfalfa being grown. And in the middle here, we have some livestock being shown. We got a llama, I believe this is the llama. Yeah, it was just one. He was by himself, so it's kind of sad to see, but we got to see guinea pigs. There's a bunch of those, a couple of babies. You see the cute guinea pigs running around. That's pretty cool. Again, the llama, just a different angle at him. Just get to see the full scope of what he looked like. Here at the top right, it's kind of difficult to see, but these are bananas, excuse me. At the top right here. And it's difficult to see, but I can see it. They're being grown right here. The bottom right here is just a row of maize or corn that was being grown. Obviously, very early stages of it being grown. Bottom left, we have some peppers, some red peppers, yellow, orange, stuff like that. Next one, we went to Cañete. This was in La Florida, where we were able to work and build houses, or help build houses. And the top left was the canal that ran from the mountain, and Zenon gave us a pretty big lecture about the culture or how this impacted the region. There was a bunch of plants going along this canal. It came from the mountain, and an American and Peruvian engineer were able to collaborate on this in the 20th century to build this canal. Bottom left is where it continued to run out, right outside of La Florida. You can see some streams running through. These are bean fields. And in the middle, this was the river we went whitewater rafting on, outside of Cañete. That was also a very fun experience. But this river ran down to a large basin. It supports large fields of grapes being grown. There was a chicken farm, which I was not able to take a picture of because we were riding back from the whitewater rafting, and I didn't have my phone. But it was there. This is a large field. Well, this is much more what I expected to see was just large fields of corn being grown. This was one example. We saw several. Bottom right here, this was in La Florida on a Monday before we started taking the bricks off the truck to help build the houses. We climbed up a little mountain right here. There's a couple of us that did it. And this is about halfway up. I believe these are squash plants or gourds. That's what it looks like. That's about halfway up. That was pretty cool. Next one is on Lake Titicaca. On the far left is some quinoa. This was on the island of Amantani, where we stayed the night. This was directly after we got off the boat, before the treacherous hike uphill that a few of us chose to take and not take the 10 Soleils dirt bike ride up. But
Explain the altitude.
yeah, the altitude, we were about 12,800 feet above sea level. If you're European, I don't know meters, but sorry. 2,800? 3,800 meters. Okay, thank you. Middle left over here, this is while we were riding to the next island of Tequila. This is, when we passed him by and I just took pictures. She was letting the bulls or cows graze. In the middle here, this was on the island of Tequila, the first one we got to before we went to Amantani and stayed the night. Picture here of some sheep grazing with what I believe to be potatoes, along with this one right here on the side, because it's at such a high altitude, potatoes tend to flourish in higher altitudes. On the far right is just a zoomed out picture of kind of what I saw in the middle right here. All right, and next one, this is, other than agriculture, this is some other experiences that I had. Top left, this was our guide. His name was Willie. He was an awesome guy. We flew into Juliaca, and from the get-go, he was awesome. He loved to chit-chat. You could have great conversations with this man. On the bus ride, it was amazing. Loved it. The second picture is at La Florida when we actually got up to the top of the mountain that we climbed on. This is the same mountain that I took the pictures of the squash growing. Next picture to the right, we saw, I'm not sure what to call them, so I call them buggies. We saw about 1,000 of these. Like, they were going everywhere in Cañete, especially Cañete. They were awesome to see flying around. Nobody stops, by the way, so it's a free-for-all on the roads. So that's pretty cool. And then the following picture is probably one of the better things I had to eat. I'm a bit picky eater, so I did my best. Okay, this is at La Lucha. Me and Dr. Metter had a shared liking of this place. I can't remember the exact name of the sandwich, but it had like shredded chicken, ham, cheese, an egg, and it was pretty good. Lettuce and tomato. The next picture is the actual picture of the restaurant. It's open 24/7, and we see Dr. Metter, who's unknowing, getting a picture taken of him. But the next one, this is on the Friday, the day after we got there. We got to walk around Lima a little bit. We see a large cathedral. There was actually a service ongoing while we were doing this. That was pretty cool to see. We had to walk around and see everything that was actually in there. And the last little bit here on the bottom right is the same Monday we helped with the bricks and stuff. We played soccer against these Peruvian teenagers on this field. We actually won. We only gave up 2 goals. The score was 10-2. We definitely won that game. And the following night, we played basketball. There was a couple of us there. We played. Again, we won. We swept them. They scored maybe 10 points. We scored, it was like 33-10 or something. No, I'm just joking. We got beat pretty bad by both teams. But that's my presentation. Thank you.
You gotta pause for questions. Are there any questions?
Sorry.
If you want, we can let them ask questions at the end as a group.
Well, then who are they asking to?
Say it again.
Who are they asking to then? Never mind. Do what you want.
It's okay. Usually that's what we do.
Who's next? Can I turn the mic on?
Hello, everyone. My name is KJ Daniels. I'm a senior chemistry major and computer science minor. And for what I wanted to study for the trip, I primarily wanted to look at Peru's environment, because while we were discussing some ideas prior to the class, talked a little bit about its history and just how biodiverse the region is. So that kind of sparked my interest initially. And I also wanted to look at some of the history just because I knew that the Spanish conquistadors took over Peru for about 300 years. So I wanted to see still how that affected Peru's, environment just with its resources and the organisms that it has. Oop. Okay. clicker may not work, I don't know. So just for the history, you may have heard of the Andes people and the Incas. They're descendants of the Corral people. And so throughout the years, there are a lot of civilizations within Peru, some of which were very prominent in roadways, some of which were very prominent in terracing, as you heard from Jeffrey, which is for agriculture. And so this led the Incan people to flourish because they had all of this land that were cultivated by their predecessors. Although eventually the Spanish conquistadors came in and for about 288 years had conquered Peru, and so a lot of its rich and natural resources were being taken away from Peru. And once Peru had gained independence from the Spanish conquistadors, to recover economically, they had to export a lot of their resources, being primarily oil, wood, and food and crops. Dr. Miller, I may just ask you, so can you go back one slide? Yeah. So primarily because of all the exports that Peru had to do, they really had to rely on the food that they produced and the crops that they made to actually recover. And a lot of the wood that they used and sold led to a lot of deforestation. That's why apart from the coast, there are areas of Peru where it's really, really dry and arid just because there aren't a lot of sources of water. So when those areas were deforested and all of those trees were taken away, it really had a very prominent effect. But even still, regardless of that, Peru still remains very biodiverse. Dr. Miller. So Peru is home to 84 of the 104 considered life zones or ecosystems of the world. It's very biodiverse, and it's even given a nickname along with 17 other countries as Noah's Ark for the organisms of the world that are part of it. And these ecosystems are found in the Andean highlands, Amazon rainforest, and one place that we actually got to visit being the Paracas Islands. Can you go to the next slide? So primarily for a lot of the crops, a lot of things that we commonly saw were like paiade or dragon fruit that we had. So paiade is this over here to the left with this kind of green little covering around it. And so the part that you would actually eat is this white cotton-looking substance right here in the middle. Kind of tastes like vanilla, and often the people would locally add that to their yogurt just for a little extra flavor. And then the black part is just the seeds that actually the fruit grows from. And then over here to the right, you can see dragon fruit, which commonly there is known as pitaya. And yeah, Dr. Mehta, if you go to the next slide. And so primarily for a lot of the trash and disposal that we saw, primarily for a more densely populated city like Lima, you're mainly going to see just a typical common garbage truck where they'll take garbage away and dispose of it. In a smaller, more rural city, you aren't necessarily going to have a large garbage disposal truck like this. The place that we were doing work in La Florida, it actually kind of had just small little garbage bins that may be from street to street that trash would be put in up until it was taken from the Peruvian municipality. You go to the next slide. And so this is while we were at the Paracas National Reserve. And so this is an infographic that's discussing the biodiversity of Peru, stating how it's one of the 17 most biodiverse countries within the world. And it's considered a mega biodiverse country. And that's just because it houses 70% or more of the world's organisms. Can you go to the next slide? And this here is a chart just talking about how Peru has how Peru exports a lot of fish, and it's one of the top 10 fisheries in the world, as only China is above it, and the United States is right below it. And you can see that it gives about 7 million fish per year, and this was in 2006, but that's still a lot for exporting compared to the rest of the world. Can you go to the next slide? And this is while we were in Lima. There was like a small little park that we visited, and it had a lot of animals. So llamas are local to Peru. They're naturally found there. And so this is just some pictures, just animals of the llamas just sitting there, just resting. And this is also that same park in Lima. You can see some goats and some sheep, and they aren't endemic to Peru, so they're non-indigenous. They were actually introduced when the Spanish conquistadors came. That's the next slide. And this is while we visited the Paracas Islands. So here you can see from your seats, you may not be able to see it as well, but we were on a boat ride and you can see some of the Humboldt penguins that are up here, up at the very top of these rocks. And you can also see the Peruvian bird booby flying up here. And also these penguins, so you see all this white that's covering these rocks, that's basically excrement from birds. Those penguins lay their eggs within that excrement. Like they bury a little ditch and they just lay their eggs in there. So that's an odd fact of what they do. And then this picture, you can't see it well because of how far away we were, but these are the Patagonian sea lions, and it's all across this body of water towards it, where it's a whole lot of sea lions at the Paracas Islands. And this is while we were on the Taquile Island in Lake Titicaca, and you can just see some of the crops and some more sheep. And then also as well, cactus naturally grows there, and as well you heard from Jeffrey some of the other plants that grow here, and as well wheat on the next slide also grows on the Taquile Island. And so that's my presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
Good evening. My name is Benjamin Brooks. Oh, wait, well, I guess I'll wait for the time to start. My name is Benjamin Brooks, and I am a double major here at Georgia Southwestern. I'm a sophomore, and I'm doing music and business. I did examining Peru's infrastructure compared to some other developed nations globally. I chose China and the US more often than not, just to give us a good baseline to look at. But before I talk about infrastructure, I'll talk about my personal experience in Peru. Right when I got there, it was a bit of a culture shock. This was my first time leaving the country, and so I was a little bit shocked just being in another world. It was a little bit odd just being like, man, I'm in a place where life is going on. I've never seen this place before, and it just exists outside of my knowing it exists. Anyway, but there was a noticeable drop in quality for basic things, like our mobile connection. Got to have that. I noticed immediately, wow, I can't get on Instagram as much or anything like that. It's just much harder. The food, maybe this is a bit subjective, but the food also dropped drastically in quality. And then the transport also dropped in quality. So like the cars are older. You see a lot more. I don't think they have as good emissions going on. So it's just, there's a lot of smog around and stuff. But the people are very kind and generous with what they have, even though life is a little bit more difficult for them over there and they might not have as much. And I was also able to observe firsthand the economic impacts of the not having as good infrastructure as, say, us or China. So here I just have some pictures for you to look at. On the far left there, we have a very kind gentleman who let me take a picture with him. I don't think he was happy about it, though. In the middle here, this very sweet lady that I was trying to order from a seafood restaurant, but we could not get across our language barrier, so we had a very tough time. But she was so sweet. And then on the far right here, we have a lady that was selling her homemade things that she had done. Here I bought a journal from her where she'd stitched on a little picture of Peru. And you saw a lot of that in Peru, of people just having their own sort of small businesses for their livelihood. On the left, we have Miller, which was our first guide. He was a great guy. He was an artist, and he also just knew a lot about Peru, took us around, and was also bilingual, so he helped us a lot. And on the right, we have Willie, which somebody's already referenced. But yeah, he was a great guy as well. He knew just about everything about certain areas of Peru, it seemed like, and Lake Titicaca, so he showed us around. And then just more examples of the kind people. On the left, we have some random people that just wanted to take us to the food court, and they were just super sweet and dancing around and showing us around and happy to see us. And on the right, we have a lady that we met in the bakery that was showing us some pictures of her favorite places to walk, recommending them, and also said that she had a son that goes to college in Georgia, which was interesting. So getting into infrastructure, what is infrastructure? Well, infrastructure, as defined by the internet, is the basic physical and organizational structures and facilities, like buildings, roads, power supplies, needed for the operation of a society or enterprise. Infrastructure is essential for any modern society to thrive, or just any society, I guess, in general, and increase the quality of life and increase access to basic services. And going off of this definition, we saw in Peru a lot of the lack of that it had a very strong impact on what we saw there. So the first one that I chose to look at was the internet and mobile connectivity. The internet connection was often very unstable and weak. So like we would go to hotels, and normally in hotels over here, you connect to the internet, it's easy, Wi-Fi. Over there, a lot of times the Wi-Fi wouldn't work, or it would be just very weak. So the internet was not as common over there, or it was common, but just not good internet. Cell service was in and out as you travel, and so like going from one county or whatever they call them over there to another, there were not seamless transitions between one to the next. You would go from one and you'd have cell service, and you'd go to the next and you'd have an interruption for maybe 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes with no service, and then you'd get it back again. And then I have a little thing at the bottom here where in the rural internet access areas, you had less than 50% reliable internet, and then in China and the US, you have over 90% reliable internet access, wherever you are. And then more on that. In Peru, mobile data exists, but it's expensive, slow, or unstable, and it presents the following limitations of education access. So over here, we can just log in and watch a Zoom class. Over there, they might have to walk miles to get to a hotspot to see, in certain areas, to see their online classes or things like that. So, and then health services, business and banking, and emergency communications. So roads and transportation, the roads are often very bumpy and unkept. And as Jeffrey mentioned, the traffic is just crazy. But that doesn't really have anything to do with infrastructure. Well, it does, but anyway. The traffic is generally very congested in places that are more developed. So in places like Lima, it's just very, very congested. And then there are lots of taxis with more people that are not able to afford reliable vehicles. And then I have here a chart of the amount invested in 2024 in these three countries. And then I just divided it so I divided the amount invested by the population to get the amount per person that they've invested in the roads. So China invested $521 billion last year in their roads, and they have a population of 1.41 billion, so that's $370 approximately per person that they invested. The U.S. had a close per person. They invested 110 billion, and then we have 334 million. In Peru, they only invested 2.83 billion, which equates to about $83 per person. So it's by a multiple of about 4 or 5 that they're behind us in how much they invest in their roads. And their roads already are worse off to begin with, so it's not a good thing. Here we have a picture in La Florida. It's just dirt, and they just drive around on it, and you can see the pathways that they've made, but there's not any concrete and stuff going on. It's just dirt. So, and then here on the left, I put an example for you to see sort of what goes on a lot of times. Someone had made like a little kind of DIY situation of people that live up on these little dirt mounds, they make their own ways to get up and down them to their houses or wherever they put up there. So here we've got one example of that where they put like, it looks like tires to get up there. And that's one of the challenges with Peru's infrastructure is that their land is very diverse. So mountainous regions and dry regions and the Amazon. So, and on the right, I have an example of the congestion in the roads. This was a smaller town, but it was still very congested. The traffic lights are less frequent as they are over here. So they have traffic lights, but they're not doing as good a job at regulating the traffic flow. And then up top, you can just see the electricity, how they've installed it. It's just very chaotic and thrown in there. And there's just tons of wires going around. So. And then next, I have water and sanitation. Access to clean water is limited. There's lack of piped water access in low-income urban and a lot of rural areas. They have water trucks that go around and deliver water. Right here I have an example of that. They have these big water containers, and this cute little dog. They have these big water containers that they will take and deliver to houses, and then the water will flow down from the top of the house for their shower or their cooking and stuff like that. A lot of families rely on these water trucks to deliver water to the neighborhoods once or twice a week, and this increases their risk of disease because they don't have as much clean water, and it also is an extra cost for the poor families to have to get the water delivered. And then here I have another chart. This is the amount of access to safe drinking water that they have. So in Peru, they are 48% don't have access to clean water that's sanitized, and then in China it's 4%, and the United States is 2%. So my takeaways are that a well-developed infrastructure is a requirement for a prosperous nation, as I've seen. So the less infrastructure you have, or good infrastructure, the less prosperous you will be. And we saw that by, even within Peru, there's a gap in their infrastructure where in the urban areas, they make twice as much approximately as they do in the rural areas. So it's had a big impact, the infrastructure. They have an unbalance as a nation in their infrastructure, both internally and externally, as I just mentioned. And there's the income statement. And then we are blessed to have strong infrastructure, which enables us to have a prosperous economy. So thank you. Any questions? What? None? Oh, that's terrible.
Hand that to someone, and they're next.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all again for coming out to hear about our adventures and our research. So my name is John Henderson. I am a business management major here at GSW. I'm a junior. And while I was in Peru, I focused on fast food. So a little bit on that. I've been a manager at Chick-fil-A for the past 3 years, and so that was kind of something I wanted to zoom in a little bit on and see kind of how different. So basically, I compared fast food here to in Peru. So fast food is a global industry. It adapts to basically each country's culture. In every country, it's going to be different. They're going to have different menu items and different ingredients that they use as well. The U.S. fast food market alone is worth over $300 billion. And then Peru they do have a fast food presence with like different local adaptations, but it serves a different purpose. I'm going to dive into that in just a minute. But I think it was very interesting to kind of see the variance basically on just how different it is here to there, but some of the same restaurants as well. Okay, so quickly, what we are familiar with here in the U.S., we have chains like McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Chick-fil-A, and Taco Bell. I have found that most of those, they focus on 3 main topics, and those are speed, affordability, and consistency. And as a manager at Chick-fil-A, those are things that I have zoomed in a lot. Those are things that Chick-fil-A focuses on. Those are things that, every fast food restaurant, and that's the goal, of a fast food restaurant, is to be fast, to be consistent. And that's what we want as customers as well. And then they're heavy on burgers, fried chicken, and different processed foods. That's what we're used to here at different restaurants here. Next. Okay, so what I saw in Peru. Probably their biggest chain that they have down there is called Bembo's. It's basically a Peruvian-style burger chain. So you could call it, I guess, the McDonald's of Peru, I guess. But I got to go to one. It was inside of a mall, which was cool. I never got to go to like a freestanding one, but something that stuck out to me was, as you can see in this picture that I took, the employees were very well dressed. The uniforms were perfectly matching. It was very professional. That was something I looked for. And the menu items, they had a pretty big selection. Benjamin and I were able to go there, and we ordered, they were like Mexican-style burgers, basically, and they had guacamole and Doritos on them, which was different, but they were pretty good. But they came with fries and drinks. They cost about 27 soles, which converted to US dollars, that was about $7. So not too bad, not too expensive. Yes, moving on. And then second one, I did want to say, I'm kind of just focusing on like these two chains, because these were kind of like the two biggest fast food chains down in Peru, at least that are primarily in Peru, not like, McDonald's. They do have McDonald's, they do have, Burger King, KFC, but I wanted to focus on the ones that are kind of primarily only down there. The second one is Norky's. I didn't get to eat there, unfortunately. I wanted to, but we never had the opportunity to. But I did get to walk through one. This was the picture I took. It was very interesting, kind of just like the structure of the building. It did not really have a front door. It basically was just completely open to the nature. And so you just walk in, and this was basically the front counter, and it had this massive, ordering area. And when you walk in a little bit further, it had some seating, and but it was a very interesting design. But unfortunately, didn't get to eat there, but the menu options did look delicious. It looked like a cool place to eat. And next. So something I wanted to zoom into was a different form factor. These were very small, like pop-up versions of restaurants that I saw at the mall that we went to. And I thought these were interesting. I've never really seen these before. And so like there was a very small, condensed, McDonald's had a very limited menu, didn't have a lot of things to order, but just kind of like a snack menu. And then there was also a very small Bembo's. But I thought these were kind of interesting. I don't think we've ever really seen these here. But I will say that foot traffic is a very big thing down in Peru. I mean, yes, the streets were chaotic, but there were so many people just constantly walking everywhere on the streets, on the side. And so I think, honestly, like for their culture, I think this was a good aspect. I think this is a good opportunity to, from a restaurant standpoint, I think it's a good way to bring in some more sales as well. But I thought that was an interesting aspect. Okay, so dining experience and customer preferences. So in the U.S., we're used to drive-throughs, mobile ordering. We have our food apps on our phones, and we want quick service. We want to get in there. We want to get out. Something that I noticed in Peru was they focus a lot more on a dine-in culture. It's just more of a social experience, and they've kind of come to a point where even the fast food restaurants that they have down there are basically not so much fast. Like, I never really saw it. I don't think I ever saw a drive-through once while I was down there. Like, people are walking, and so, you can't walk through a drive-through. But basically, the fast food restaurants are utilized in a different way, in my opinion, from what I saw. But I'm going to jump into that in just a second. Next one. So, pricing. So, comparing to the US, I did have a couple of things I wanted to touch on. So, if I compare to the US, Peru's fast food prices were cheaper once you convert, the currency. But something I did was I wanted to compare the prices of Peruvian fast food to other Peruvian dine-in restaurants, and so maybe a little bit more like a step up, a little bit more fancier. And something I found was prices were very similar, and so I thought that was a little bit strange, but that was kind of when I was learning a little bit more of how I think that how fast food restaurants are utilized down there. They just focus on that dine-in culture, and so what I came to the conclusion I came to was that I think that fast food restaurants are seen more as like a treat option, not so much like, here it is, I'm going to McDonald's, grab a quick meal, keep going, continue my day. There it's more of a, social experience, like, oh, I'm shopping in the mall, let me go get a meal, let me sit down and enjoy this. There wasn't really ever that opportunity to, go through a drive-through, order, and keep going. That just really wasn't an option. So it's very different. And so kind of a twist, honestly, because, we're used to fast food in a certain way here, but it's very different, it's utilized in a completely different way, in my opinion, down there. Next. Oh. There it is. All right, so, and finally, just wanted to focus on the perception and the portfolio. So, perception, I think it's focused as well as it's an easy option, but they don't so much focus on like a speed option. And so, it's easy, it's kind of seen as a treat, or perhaps a backup option, as I said, but it's not really seen as that, I need to get a meal, keep going, finish out my day. And then portfolio, menu options were heavy, very similar to the US is what we see here. Lots of menu options, different, sides, fries, nuggets, stuff like that. Different toppings to put on, like cheeseburgers and things like that. And they had, some different cultural items, like they were very heavy, especially at Norky's, they were very heavy on rotisserie chicken, but not really something you see at a fast food restaurant here, but that's something that is very common down there. And conclusion. So comparatively, they don't really share the same purpose, as I mentioned. It does contrast with the US's grab-and-go mentality. It's just more seen as that social experience option. And then it just kind of serves as that last resort option, just because, so many things are so different down there. But that's all I have. Thank you all. Any questions?
Hey guys, my name is Russell Wright. I'm a senior management major, and today I'm going to tell you about some of the unique experiences in the National Spirit of Peru, Pisco. So I was going to start off with the service learning aspect. It was really interesting learning about La Florida, how initially it started with hundreds of thousands losing their homes in a almost an 8 on the Richter scale earthquake in 2007, and Senor Zenon told us how ever since he's been trying to basically build it back better with all these valley communities. La Florida stands for the flower, and behind him is where, whenever Millard Fuller passed away, the namesake of the Fuller Center, he planted 74 trees in his name, and now you get to see foliage everywhere, and which wasn't in this desert town. And in this picture, you see KJ and Noah the day we walked around and cleaned up the streets. And so Jeffrey kind of touched on it. We got to spend some time with the kids, get humbled in soccer. And then here's our team picture. They had somewhat of their own storm dome, as you can see on the left. And it was another humbling, but that's good for us sometimes. And so I thought it was really interesting. As you can see, initially when we got there, I thought he was just a translator, a guide. I got to talking to Millard over dinner one night, and he was so much more. He's a nationally renowned sculptor. He had to attend the university in Lima, but he's from the Puno region. Here you can see one of his works. And I got to talking to him, and he said that his family was one of the first ones in the Puno region to receive a habitat home. And then he was like the first child born there. And so as a testament to Millard Fuller's legacy, they named him after him. And then he told me about how he was able to reach out to Millard Fuller's widow, Linda, and ever since then, he's balanced a career, been involved with the Fuller Center, and told me he likes to give back, and he aspires one day to come to America and get his master's in fine arts. And so here we are with the national spirit of Peru. They take a lot of pride. It has a large economic impact. We visited a distillery just outside of Cañete, and it's called Pisco Zapata, and there's the founder, and they've been in operation since the 1980s. Part of the Pisco is it's actually kind of similar to other spirits we see. If bourbon, it has to be made in a designated region, so bourbon's made in Kentucky, Champagne, France. Pisco comes from designated areas in Peru. So it has to meet strict guidelines, distilled with copper, once distilled, not aged, and has to use certain varieties of grapes. And so as you can see here, this is more the primitive technique. It was stored in these clay kegs. In the middle is one of the copper stills, and that's the master distiller giving us a rundown of the process. And so that's the entrance to the distillery. We can see Jeffrey sampling the Pisco. And then on the left is some of the several different varieties you can see of the Pisco. And so tried a few new foods. On the right is a chicken foot. In the middle is cow stomach. And then my personal favorite was the alpaca meat pizza. And I would say it's pretty similar to beef, and I tried again. And so just kind of another really special experience was getting to meet some of these different indigenous people. The first island we rode by boat for 2 hours on Lake Titicaca. These are the Tequila people. They call the inhabitants the Tequileños, and very welcoming. This is a couple of their elders. And then we went through somewhat of a symbolic spiritual ceremony with the traditional shaman, which was very cool. And then here you can see some of their traditional interpretive dance. And another thing they're known for is their vibrant and really high quality textiles. And then the last indigenous people, a very unique experience, was the Uru people of the Uros floating islands. And so Lake Titicaca is known for producing this special reed, and they live off the lake, they catch the trout, very sustainable lifestyle, everything they need. And originally, they lived on boats trying to avoid taxation, and then they came to build these islands. We learned the different process of, they say they last about 40 years, and how they replenish them and take care of them. So, it's very unique to be in the middle of a lake just on an island of plants. And so, thank y'all. Any questions?
All right, we're getting to the reluctant crowd. Who's up now?
Hello, I'm Tammy Holman. My major is criminal justice, and I'm a sophomore. I went over like family, culture, different things like what they have help-wise compared to what we have here in the United States, like the habitat and volunteer things and stuff of that nature. All right, so to start off, I looked at the Fuller Center, and that is where we called it like the compound. That's where we had breakfast, and they were very welcoming, and it was just very different over there because, like, whenever you go to somewhere in the U.S., they're not warm and welcoming, especially like if you go up north. The whole time, any place that we went to in Peru, they were very welcoming and things of that nature. All right, so this is whenever we first landed. We got picked up by the college, and we didn't actually know that they were going to be picking us up, but they were very warm, welcoming. They actually provided us with food and all of that. On the right-hand side, that is where we were staying with a family, and they were doing a ritual, going over things. He was like blessing us and things of that nature. All right, and on this one is where we went to Lake Titicaca. We were greeted by the families. They were all very nice. They were selling different items and that we could purchase that were things that they made on the islands. And we actually bought some stuff that is here that she brought over. All right, this here is where we were actually doing work, building the houses. We had one day where we unloaded the bricks and all. We bought, Dr. Meadow actually went and bought the bricks and all, and we unloaded them on one day, and the second day was the day that we actually were doing the work. And trust me, I about died. I really thought I was going to die. But this is us working and then taking a break. This is the first day where we actually got the bricks, and we had actually walked around and picked up trash while we were waiting on the bricks to be delivered. But I think we've done a pretty good job we had 2 separate loads, and I think we've done it in like 30 minutes. So I think we've done really good with helping with that. We did have one little issue where some fell off, but only like a few broke, but it was really good. And this is just another picture of us taking the bricks off. I think this is actually the second load that we done. More pictures, and then also the picture of us before we unloaded the trucks, and then the project of doing the actual unloading of the bricks. This here is where we played soccer with the teenage boys. As you all already know, we lost, but we had a good time doing it. And then this is just another picture of us with the kids playing soccer. And then after we played, we actually all had watermelon together as well. And this is on the islands that we went and visited. They sat and told us about, like on this picture, I don't know if you can really see it, but it's how it's built and how they put the things in, because if they don't anchor them down, they could wake up anywhere if it floats off. But in the bowls, you have the different eggs that they have, and then also some fish. And he went over like how they cut the blades, with a blade, how they cut the grass in order to actually make the things to make the area bigger for the families, and those are the houses that families live in. And this is where we stayed at with the family. This is where we were actually, somebody had said, some of us walked up the hill. I was one of those that paid the money to get rode up by the motorcycle. But they were very friendly, very welcoming, and it was just a very different experience because I travel around all the time, but this was totally different. This was giving back and working and meeting and like living as they live. Again, another picture of us. And we also, before we went to the families, we went to different shops and things and bought stuff to give to them for allowing us to come and visit with them. So it's like offerings that we bought and took there to provide to them. And this is where, like family and school, here and our kids to go to take school buses. The picture on the left is kids, they are in uniforms and they all just walk back and forth to school. The one on the right is in La Florida. They are actually walking their kids to the school. We did see the school that the kids go to, and it was very different than what we have here. But you can see the different in the city and then in Florida. And this is also in Florida. The ones on the left, the one in the top middle, the kids are being driven by a motorcycle, and then the other ones they're just walking to school. The one on the right-hand side, this is the kids that were on the floating islands. And then the little boy here, he very sweet. He just kept saying, amigo, like, yes, amigo. So it was just really cool to see them and interact with the families. I'm sorry, I thought I had a thank you page, but I guess I left it out. Any questions?
With all those nice pictures, now we're going to go to something very serious. The inequality, guys. So, my name is Cecilia Hamburger Plain. I'm actually a law student from Denmark. I'm on a Rotary Scholarship and studying business here at GSW. And before I went to the US in August, I have never been outside of Europe. So this opportunity going to Peru was amazing because who normally goes to 2 continents in a year? Like, that was really amazing. Yes. So Benjamin said it earlier, but the population is around 34 million people. And that is relevant because if we look at how many people that are in what we categorize as poverty, in 2023, approximately 29%, which is almost 10 million people, of Peru's population lived in poverty. And that was an increase from 2022. That was, at that time, 27.5%. Tammy was also talking about it. We went to La Florida, and La Florida is approximately 3 hours from Lima. What is very special about this place is that it's a very dry area. And as you can see here, these are like the foundations of the houses that we helped building. And again, even though you see, like Jeffrey was also talking about it, in this area is really dry, and there's a lot of dirt as well. So next one. This man, Sinan, thank you. Russell also said a little bit about it, but the trees you can see in the background. He helped plant these trees, and he said something that was really interesting to me. So first of all, he said that there was a big earthquake, and I think it was around 2007. But that meant that the house around La Florida was totally destroyed. And as you can see, the house is not built in the way that like people build houses in the US. It's like 4 walls and then something as a roof. That's how they build houses. So all these houses, a lot of them were destroyed, and then they have to like build it up again. And he also said something really interesting. He said that since he started building, planting those trees, the people in La Florida start trusting him, but still not the municipality. So they didn't trust the mayor, but they trust Sinan that he would come and fix the city. And another interesting thing was when we went to Lima, I got an email, and I think the rest of the group got the same email, that it was a state of an emergency situation. And so I will talk about it in a minute, but about the economic system as well. But overall, it was interesting hearing that people in this area trusted like him more because they actually saw that somebody was doing something good for his city or their city. So economic structure. Jeffrey talked a little bit about it as well. Agriculture is very, very big. So Peru relies on export of raw materials, which would be minerals and agricultural projects. So you can imagine if you live in a place where natural disasters is pretty common, you are very vulnerable. Like your economy is depending on these raw materials, so when there is a crisis like an earthquake or like any other natural disasters, your country is not going to do as well as they would before that crisis. So therefore, Peru is very vulnerable to the global market at all. Like whatever happens can really impact these people. If we look at the differences, Benjamin also talked a little bit about it. If you live in the city, you have a different life than the people that live in the rural area. So I found some stats on it, and it seems that poor rural local girls are 91% more likely to be left behind in access to quality education than their wealthier urban non-local kids or peers. And it's not like as a big surprise if you think about it. Often with the urbanization, people that actually have the money to buy a house or apartment in Lima and are often better educated. And therefore the people that are not as good educated, they are living in these rural areas. And Benjamin also talked about it, the infrastructure. So there are also what we call like informal employment, which means that the wages that like they have, so how much they get paid is not very well paid in these rural areas. I can't remember who said it, but the shops, a lot of the shops, it's not like normal shops in the US. They open maybe up a shop on their bike. They have a bike where they buy some candy and then they sell it. That's like in these areas, some of the shops and businesses that they have. I didn't personally see a lot of shops when we went to La Florida. So what I observed was that there was not necessarily a lot of good jobs opportunities. And with infrastructure as well, like you could see here, Benjamin also talked a little bit about it. When you don't have that good infrastructure, your ability to get to work or get somewhere is not as good as if you have the infrastructure. So overall job opportunities in these rural areas is not as good as in for instance, Lima, in the cities. Education, there is not as good level of education in these rural areas, and the same thing with healthcare. And that talks about, again, the infrastructure. If you cannot really get around or get to these areas, then you can imagine that like if you live an hour away from a hospital, then if something happens, you're not as good. Your opportunity to get cure is not as good as if you live in a bigger city. That was it. Any questions?
Hello everyone, my name is Noah Bridges and I'm a 20-year-old biology pre-med major, and as a science major I'm going to try to bring some of the science to the table with this and study the sociology from the Peruvian perspective. Go to the next slide. So what is sociology? Sociology is basically the scientific study of human interactions between humans with each other and then humans with their environment. And this is really important because it gives us a better idea of all the different environments that are around the world, because as we can probably guess, everything's completely different. And you know that going into a trip like this, but when you actually go to the trip, it's kind of humbling. It's like, wow, this is actually really different. And the two ways you can break that up is material culture and then non-material culture. So we can go to the next slide. Material culture is pretty much what it sounds like. It's basically the physical aspects that define a culture and something that makes it different. So like, we'll get into that a little bit later actually. The non-material culture is also what it sounds like, and it's basically the religion, the beliefs, the laws, and some of the values and family values that this particular culture has. We can go to the next one. So going into the material culture, the first thing I looked at were the buildings. The buildings were actually really different. When we first landed in Lima, it was dark and you could see a bunch of lights and it was absolutely beautiful. It was more like the United States, or the closest to the United States, I'd say, at least towards the more central part. The pictures that are right around the center are going to be the ones that are in Lima. And that was around some of the public capitol buildings. And that was like one of the squares. That was really cool. The buildings kind of resembled, kind of looked like Catholic European style buildings. They looked very similar to the ones you'd see there. It really transfers over the Spanish culture you can see with those buildings. And then the one on the left is going to be the Lake Titicaca. That's actually Puno. And as you can see, all the buildings are really clustered together. Lima was a little bit like that, but less so. And that was from the view around where we actually visited the University of Puno, which had about 50,000 students, which is actually really impressive. One of the faculty of the school actually took us to the very top of the building, and we could actually see the view, and it was absolutely beautiful. And then for transport, as a couple people highlighted, as Jeffrey highlighted them as buggies, we can see in the top right, it's a little stretched, but it's basically like a motorcycle that's been covered up by a bunch of metal. That's pretty much the best way to describe it. It's basically a free-for-all with these, that their way of communication is not by blinker or anything like that. They usually just honk the horn repeatedly. So if you're just going around the cities, that's pretty much what you hear. I wish I had a video of that. That'd be funny, but yeah. Also, you can't really tell right there, but actually in the window, there's actually a little hole. It actually looks like it was specifically cut out. I'm not really sure what that was for. Maybe it's like, the AC of the bike. I'm not really sure, but if you're interested in them, they're about like 12,000 soles, which is about $3,000 for a brand new one. So like 2025. Anyways, with the textiles, one thing you notice is they're really colorful. More towards the cities, the bigger cities, you would see a lot of stuff more like you'd see in the United States. But once you started getting to some of the smaller, more rural communities, you would see the really colorful textiles, kind of like the ones you can see right here. It's a little less where you can see that, but they're really colorful with their outfits. Also, that one up there. And then as far as the clothing, I touched on that. With the currency, we can flip to the next one. We can see it up there. So it goes from 10 soles to 20 soles, 50 soles, 100 soles, and then 200. I was able to see all of them except the 200, and my favorite one was the 100, not because it was the highest one that I got, but because it was the most colorful. It's actually a really beautiful build. Had a really pink, colorful tree, as well as a hummingbird on the back. I thought it was really cool. And then with the tools, they were fairly similar to stuff we would see in our country. And then with pottery, you would see most of them making their own pottery in some of the smaller communities as well. They often handcrafted a lot of the bowls and stuff that they would use to cook. And when they'd bring us out soup, you could actually tell like they painted it. It was actually really cool. And then with the technology, it's definitely varied depending on where you were at. The bigger cities had definitely more advanced technology, and then as you got down to some of the rural areas, it just continued to go down, but that's with that. And then handcrafts, you could see honestly pretty much anywhere you went, but it's actually, I would say, it's pretty well diversified between the rural and urban cities. I thought it was really interesting because no matter how poor somebody was, or if they had a lot of money or a little bit of money, you would always see people on the streets working hard to try to make what they could. And I found that really humbling because no matter what they had, I could tell they were working hard. When we were actually in Lima, around that spot in the center, a little girl actually approached me, Benjamin, and John, and she was selling suckers for like 1 soles, which is equivalent to like 36 cents. And that's how they were trying to make the money to eat. And I really respected that because they really did work hard to sell their handcrafts. And they're actually really neat. I definitely got a couple of those. And then the animals, I would say they have a lot of very similar animals as to what we have, but the most prominent were definitely the llamas and the alpacas. Those were the most unique ones. And then with the outside environment, what I noticed in Peru was it was absolutely beautiful. Like with the sights, the mountain ranges, and the water and lakes and everything, it was really, really beautiful. So in that picture on some of the sides, that's where we were in Lake Titicaca, and that's some sheep right there. And that is actually one of the floating islands, which I thought was really cool. They actually compile a bunch of reeds together. The water's about 10 feet deep, and the reeds are floating on the water. So when you step down, you're actually going down. It's like a raft village. It was really cool. I think there were like 30 people on the island or something right around there, and they actually had a president, which is interesting. So that's cool. We'll go to the next one. And then non-material culture would be more of the religion and language. With the religion, I noticed towards the large areas, they were more Catholic, and they had some of the bigger, more Spanish, European religion. And then once you started going to the more rural areas or the smaller areas, you'd see they had Pachamama and Pachapapa, which translates to Mother and Father Earth. And it translated to basically they really focused on the energy of the earth. So that's something that they focused on. And then their language, in the bigger areas, they had mainly Spanish, very little English. So there's definitely a barrier there. Google Translate came in very handy. So if you ever do that, Google Translate's your friend. The dress code, I kind of touched on that earlier. The urban areas are more kind of sort of like us. And then the rural areas are more kind of like that. You can see up there. It's very unique, very colorful. The dresses that the ladies had actually had like 20 different layers, and it was really hot there, so I don't know how they had so many layers on, but they were really colorful and beautiful. And then laws, that was one thing that we touched on as far as the cars. There aren't really any rules. You just kind of, if you want to get out in an intersection, you just start inching your way out and hope nobody hits you. That's pretty much what they did. It was funny. And then the family dynamic, everybody was really loving and sweet and very welcoming. It was very humbling. They were very hardworking, and I found that something to be very admirable. So we can move to the next one. And then the impact of the cultural differences in actually doing these studies, I think that's very important because as, you know, when we live in America, we're more centered on how our society is, and we kind of don't think about how others have it. And I think it's interesting to focus on their experiences and just really their culture, because it can help give you a more holistic view on how different people interact in the world, and it can help make us, it definitely humbled me and made me appreciate what I had, because I realized how blessed we are in this country to even have a paved road. It's really amazing, and it's definitely something to help like humble you. So with the pictures right there, we can see that's Peru, us going on the way to the 13,000 elevation around Lake Titicaca. That's us first getting to Lima, and then that's some more around the Lake Titicaca. And we can go to the next one. And that's Lake Titicaca again. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate y'all for listening.
All right, Jimmy, you're up. Do we have a presentation here? Esther, you're up. There it is. There seem to be mixed opinions on how it works. I thought it was fun.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Esther Kulabali. I'm a nursing major here at GSW, and I'm a junior. And I focus on plants in Peru just because I like nature and colors and all that stuff, as you can tell. So yeah. So before going to Peru, I expected to see mountainous ranges, like Lake Titicaca, the Paracas Islands, and stuff of that nature. So these are just a few pictures of what we've seen. So I expected to see something that kind of looked a bit barren, and those are Incan ruins, Paracas Islands, things of that nature. Same thing here, Incan ruins here, and things like that. But actually being in Peru, there was a lot more color than I expected, and a lot more flowers and plants and stuff. So I kind of focused on that. So we went to 3 different main regions. So we went to Lima, the capital of Peru, Cañete, or La Florida, and then we went to Lake Titicaca, but more specifically, we stayed in Amantani. So I kind of focused on the plants and flowers that I've seen in those 3 regions. So here we have the pink orlander, a queen palm. We've seen many different palm trees while we were in Peru in a lot of different other regions, but this is just one that kind of stood out to me just because it was really flowy and bright and all that. And then in the middle, we have a white Nereon olander as well. And then here we have a cypress. Those are easy to kind of figure out it was a cypress just because they're typically really dense and they stand out. And then we have an ivy-leafed Plegoronium, and then a Cuban royal palm again. Those are my favorite palm trees. Those are my favorite trees because again, they're loud and colorful. And then here again in Peru, in Lima, we have another fan palm. I called it the sad palm trees just because they're not as open. And they just kind of fold on themselves. And then here we have Cañete. So this is the place where we basically built or started the foundation for the homes. And on the site, I noticed this flower here on the left, which really stood out to me just because I didn't expect to see anything just because it was so dry. But it was, there. And then in the middle, we have a zonal. So this was actually at the site of in Cañete, where we stayed at, kind of in the garden area. There was a playground as well there. And that stood out to me as well. And then we have a Madagascar periwinkle that was also in that same garden where we stayed at. Again, in Cañete, we have the Camara, an orange one, a Spathodia, and then a white grape bougainvillea. We've seen a lot of those as well. We saw pink ones, red, purple, just because they're very adaptable. So they were in many different regions all across Peru. And again, we've seen an elephant bush. I noticed this when we were actually, we finished visiting an Incan ruin kind of thing. So after they had a garden right after that we all kind of went into. And as you can see, it's kind of looks like a succulent, but it really isn't. And then in the middle, we have a crane flower. So this is right outside where we stayed as well. It kind of resembles a bird, but there's other colors like blue, red, pink. But it stands out just because of how bright it is and how it resembles a bird, as I said. And on the right, we have a snake plant just because of how the leaves kind of look. Again, a pink grape bougainvillea, agave plant in the middle, and then the red grape bougainvillea, again, like I said, those are really common. On the left one, I actually noticed this one at the distillery that we went to for Pisco. They also had a grapevine that you could also see right above when you kind of look because it was sort of open, but it did have kind of a closing on top of the distillery. So that's that grapevine that I was talking about on the right. And then again, a portulaca on the left as well. And that was, again, in that garden that we visited after the Incan ruins. And then this is when we went to Amantani. So that's where we stayed with that family. In the middle, it kind of looks like a succulent, but that was actually at the family's home. They had many different versions of this. One's on the roof and on the sides, all across the compound kind of. And on the left, that's actually the national Peruvian flower. And that really just kind of looks like a trumpet, kind of if you get it at a good angle. But that was present all through Lake Titicaca when we went to I think we also went to Amitani and then Tequila, and that also was present at Tequila. And then on the right, we have a Parish Golden Eye as well. And then a Garden Dahlia again when we were in Amitani, a Damask Rose, and then a Cairo Forum. And that's my project. Thank you for listening. Are there any questions?
Greetings, my name is Temple. I'm a history major, poli-sci minor. The reason for my project, I decided to compare the differences between Peru and Nepal. Since I had the fortunate experience of going on both trips, I decided to compare both of them. And this is because it's my only time I've ever visited a country that's both developing countries. I also decided to compare, the differences of what I noticed between both of them. So to start off in Nepal, the average monthly wages in Nepal ranges about $100 American, 13,996 rupee. Agriculture is the main source of income for the majority of the population. Over 20% of the population lives in poverty. While they have limited infrastructure, there's also a lot of developing locations in Nepal. The country, their main exports is carpets, handicrafts, leathers, jute products, vegetables, and cereals. They're one of the least developed countries in the world, and they also have like a low standard of living and high poverty rates. Throughout Nepal, you'll notice it because you'll see lots of trash on the streets, lots of people outside on the streets, not necessarily homeless, but it's outside and about. For Peru, the median salary is between $500 and $800 per month. Peru's social economic situation includes poverty, inequality, and economic growth. About 1 in 3 Peruvians live in poverty. While we were in Peru, I think Russell said, while we were in Peru, they had a little situation with the government where in Lima, to where they had protests. So there's kind of like tension surrounding Peru. Surrounding citizens of Peru and the government. There's also a lot of corruption between the president of Peru. She's been caught having like a luxury watch on her while people starve. So like that. So the culture. Nepalese people have a rich and varied culture with a strong focus on the hospitality and community and elder respect. Hinduism and Buddhism make up the majority of the Nepalese religion, and they're not necessarily a religious country, but when you go there, you will definitely see religion plays a heavy role in the Nepali culture. The culture of Peru is a combination of Asian, Spanish, and indigenous elements. It is well known for the vibrant celebrations and varied cuisines and famous sites. They're influenced by Inca civilizations and the Spanish Empire. Over 40% of the people in Peru identify as indigenous or for example, like the Yoruba people and Quechua speakers that we were able to see. Something that they share together is they both have a shared cultural identities, they both have indigenous heritage roots, customs and traditions surrounding each respective religions, and religion plays a key role in both of the cultures surrounding Peru and Nepal. So here, this is Nepal. In the top left corner, that's right here. That's a shrine, and Kathmandu, there's over 5,000 shrines alone. So that kind of gives you an idea how religious the countries are. Right here, this is when we visited the monkey temple. I took a picture with some monks. Because of Nepal's religious background, it's kind of disrespectful. They have bulls and cows are respected animals, so it's illegal to eat or kill a bull or a cow. Because they respect animals and stuff, animals are seen as like they're not seen as gods, but they're seen as somebody you're supposed to worship. So they had a lot of dogs roaming around the streets. They're very well trained. They won't come to attack you, but you can pet them. This right here, on top right, is when we visited the school. This is what we did for our service learning. What we did was we basically laid the foundation of rocks for the badminton court that they later set up in the middle. Right here was in the morning time. They were doing a little roll call. That's why they're all lined up. And these two right here, you can't see it. They were about to perform a traditional Nepali dance. I have a video, but I can upload it. Right here in the bottom left corner, this is a traditional Buddha death ceremony. This is where we witness people's bodies get burnt and kind of get the smell of it to us. Kind of didn't smell well, but you know. Okay. Bottom right here, this is again at the school. I got blessed by one of the school teachers. I forget what kind of necessarily symbolism that is, but I believe that something has to do with the Buddha blessing. Because I know that's definitely one of the Nepal player flags that we got, but I'm not too sure about what that was. So this is my experience in Peru. Right top left, this is when we were on the islands of Anita, what was it pronounced? Yeah. So this is when we were on the top islands. These right here are the locals, indigenous people of the islands. Like they said before, they wear thick clothing, up to like 20 different layers of clothing, which is absolutely crazy to me in that heat. Right here is the floating islands of the Uros Islands of Peru. You know, there's also indigenous people that live here, like 30 to 40 people. I think they are part of the Quechan speakers, if I believe, and they have their own unique language. Very, very interesting. Number 4, if y'all remember. Right here, this is part of the. This is part of the. On the island of I can't pronounce it. Amantada. This part of the island. We were going to a religious ceremony, and part of the ceremony. We got to put on these little, kind of like these little outfits with the little hats. And me, Russell, KJ. Right here, here's another woman on the floating island, not the island, the island. She's wearing the traditional outfits, I would say. You know, you can see they have all the clothing on there. Like I said, 20 different pairs of clothing, which is absolutely insane. Right here, since llamas are, you know, I guess they're a national animal, this was on, I don't even can't describe it to you, island, but this is on one of the islands we saw the llamas. Right here is an Inca tomb that we see on one of the islands. They kind of have a bunch of them scattered all over the island, but this is probably the only one that remained intact. So it kind of shows you the history, culture of the Inca civilization. Right here was a pyramid kind of temple-like of another Inca civilization that we had visited to earlier in the island. Right here, it's kind of not the full Nazca line, but it's a Nazca line of another Inca civilization. And then right here, yeah, Pisco, everybody's favorite. So we get into infrastructure. The infrastructure in Nepal is very, very underdeveloped. You have roads, like in the top left, you'll have where it goes from smooth paved roads that look normal roads to roads like here in the top right corner that it goes from smooth paved to dirt, just like that. It's almost like they just kind of completely skip over it. In the middle here, this is kind of common that you see throughout Nepal. A bunch of wires just thrown up on a pole. Fire hazard, electricity hazard, but it wasn't really too dangerous. You know, they say it's all maintenance control. When you go to the temples in Nepal, they have a bunch of religious symbols on the ground and on the temples. For example, right here, this is a lotus flower. It's a symbol of prayer and peace. This is another, right here, this is another image. This is in Peru. As you can see, the infrastructure is very waning. You know, you have on one side right here dirt road or paved road, and then on the very other side it goes straight to dirt road with a lot of dips and, you know, just not very nice to drive on. Down here, here's another example of what the roads look like in Peru, or some of the roads look like in Peru. And then for this is a house outside of La Canta or La Florida, I believe. These are what a lot of houses for the poor people of Peru look like. They're kind of adobe style, wood style, but ultimately they're kind of just put up houses that, in comparison to Nepal, I would not want to live. So here, once again, we have Nepal. Right here, this top left corner is kind of, I guess this will be an average household for someone in Nepal. You got, usually if they have a store on the bottom and they'll live on the top roofs, that's where they make their money at. Right here is a little stand-up toilet. That's usually common in Nepal. A lot of toilets in Nepal have squat toilets where you had to pop a squat. Once again, here's more of the houses. Here, to give you an idea what it looks like. Because Nepal is mountainous, driving along the edges of Nepal, and you drive on the left side of the road, which is closest to the edge, there's a lot of places in Nepal that did not have any type of road, I guess, road wall or something, so you're literally like feet away from just falling off the side of the mountain, which kind of is a fun experience. On the bottom part right here, this is houses in Nepal. They put rocks and sheet metal because they don't nail the rocks. They don't nail the sheet metal into the houses. They have to have rocks on there to keep the houses from flowing away. Over here, there's an overview of Nepal as we're flying to. I cannot remember, but here's this little overview. Here's another example of the houses. Here's a better example of houses, what they look like. Of course, the bottom floor, you typically have stores, shops, markets, and then the top two floors is where they would live. And then here's another example of the road in Nepal. For Peru, you kind of have the same example. So one thing about Peru is these right here, a lot of houses in Peru aren't complete up the top because the citizens, if you don't build the top of your house, you don't have to pay taxes, so it's kind of used as a tax cheat code for citizens. This was another house outside of La Florida or La Canta that you can see is kind of a quick-made adobe houses, kind of on the hilly area, not too much, not really stable, but it will do. This was in La Florida, as you can see, other people had these photos. It's basically another example of a dirt road that they had, and if you can see this right hand right here, as you notice, the paved road, that was a dirt road. That's kind of a big takeaway that I had for both Nepal and Peru. Right here, you get the idea of more of the houses, what they look like. Here, just like in Nepal, they put rocks on top of the sheet metal just to make sure the houses don't blow away. Because it's a developing nation, you're going to have trash everywhere and all that good stuff. Here they have here's an idea of the telephone lines. It's a better than Nepal, but yeah. So way of living in Nepal, because they rely on heavy agriculture. You see people right here walking with water buffalo, using to go graze cattle. This is a local market right here where people come out to sell their goods. People right here go and buy their market, or go to markets and buy local markets and buy foods. Down here, bottom left, this is where students will be walking to school, and just like in Peru, a lot of the students have dress codes and stuff. It's kind of nice, touch they little, and right here is agriculture. For Nepal, since soccer is a primary sport, we play soccer. We hoop with them, lost badly. In the top right, this was a religious ceremony that we got to experience from the local people on the islands. Right here is a man carrying or walking his horse. They have to rely on horse transportation. On some of the islands, got to rely on a horse transportation because they don't necessarily have enough vehicles for everybody. Right here is also another picture of students with their uniforms. That was also kind of like Nepal. That's kind of a nice feature that a lot of schools provide their students with uniforms. This picture right here is a picture of a local market that people from the islands and people in the surrounding areas will go to get their goods, not like a big grocery store. And then on the bottom right, this was one of the islanders making. He was making soap, shampoo for one of us to try it. Jeffrey got to try it, and now he has gray hair. Right. So takeaways I want to give is Nepal has poor and developing infrastructure, especially the roads. A lot of people work in agriculture. They have close-knit communities, rural villages. Mountainous terrain makes it in general, harder to do things, and poor air quality. What I got from Peru is overall they're a more developed city and infrastructure than Nepal. They still have rural housing and villages and like adobe housing. And they also have high poverty levels outside of the cities, outside of larger cities, just like Nepal. So, yeah.
All right, so we do have one more presentation, but we have a technical issue to deal with first, so please bear with us. Jimmy, you can.